When you think of a foreign film, what country comes to mind? France maybe? Or Japan? I'm gonna guess you didn't say India, even though India has multiple film industries, has been making movies since film was invented, and also makes the most films annually in the entire world. So when I say there's an Indian Bollywood movie called Awara, and it's one of the most popular and successful films ever made, my question is, have you even heard of it? Awara was a black and white film from 1951 that was so popular that I'm actually kind of afraid I'm gonna undersell how big it was. Awara was the third film by a director called Raj Kapoor, and he also acted in it. And not just like as some little cameo, he's the main star. It's a movie about his character. It sold like 100 million tickets in the Soviet Union, sold like another 100 million tickets in China, and it was extremely popular in the Middle East and across Europe and Africa. Like, they've remade Awara 6 times in Turkey. This footage is from the 1964 one. It was at the point where, like, you know Chairman Mao, like Mao Se-sung? He's on record as saying Awara was his favorite film of all time. But he died before the Mario movie could come out, so who can say? That's crazy, isn't it? In a time where studios are increasingly trying to market themselves to a Chinese audience, to the extent that they'll be literally racist, one of the most successful Chinese films of all time is Indian? And I know what you're thinking, 1951, that's so long ago. Does anyone today even care about it? Well, excuse me, Mr. Man. Yes, and I can prove it. There's this director called Zhe Jiangke. He's an internationally well-respected filmmaker from China. And you know he's a big deal because he's won awards. In the year 2000, he made a film called Platform, voted one of the best films of the decade, best films of the millennium, blah blah blah. Platform's about an isolated village on the border of China sometime in the 1980s. And some of the themes that Platform discusses are how times are changing and how things are moving on culturally. And in Platform, there's a scene early on where a bunch of people go to the cinema and Awara is just straight up playing in that town's local cinema, and it's completely sold out. The whole point of that scene is that Awara is so big that it's a film that everybody knows. What you need to understand about Raj Kapoor, the director and main star of Awara, is that when this movie came out, he was the man. Like, you think American celebrities are big, but think about how wide Raj Kapoor's influence stretched. I mean no exaggeration when I say this. He was like if all 4 of the Beatles Dragon Ball Z fusion danced into one freakish creation. Which is probably not the best metaphor to use when trying to sell something. All of this is to say, you've probably made a lot of assumptions about what Awara is, just because I said it was Indian. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to see that it's something quite different. If you're like me, the main thing you want from a movie nowadays is just for it to give you something different. Something that feels so unfamiliar and so unique that it's like dunking your head into a bucket of water. And Awara is 100% that. Awara is a Bollywood film, but that doesn't really mean as much as you might think. It's basically the same thing as Hollywood. You know how Hollywood is a real place where all the big budget films are made and then killed? All Bollywood films are made in a city called Mumbai. But when the British used to rule India, that city was called Bombay. So they took the B and put it in front of Hollywood because... So the films just all have to have the same things, a big budget, musical numbers, they're melodramatic, and usually the films are in Hindi. But Awara is an interesting movie in the context of this style, because it basically defined it. Bollywood as a style, as a genre, wouldn't exist in its current form if Awara wasn't the huge success it was. It influenced pretty much everything that came out after it, and despite being over 70 years old, Awara is shockingly modern. It feels like it could have come out today. Some of that's because there's not a lot of stuff like it. It's a crime movie, it's also a really good love story, and because it's a Bollywood film, it's also a musical. That's a lot of things that really shouldn't go together on paper, but because the filmmaking is just so unbelievably ahead of its time, it does. It just kind of all works. But the real reason that Awara hasn't aged a single day is because it was meant to be a progressive political film in 1950 about how the rich suck. And nothing's really changed. Actually, that's not true. Things have gotten a lot worse, so there has been change. Let's quickly run through the story, because I really want to show you how far Awara goes with its criticisms of the wealthy. My script says to make a joke about crazy rich Asians here, but I couldn't think of one. Well, the movie starts with a man called Raj being put on trial for the attempted murder of a very rich, very well-respected judge. And this guy's like actually rich. His house looks like a place Jay-Z would rent to teach the hood about Bitcoin. Back in court, Raj pleads guilty to the murder accusations. The rest of the movie then takes place as a flashback, where we first follow Raj's childhood in the slums, where he lives alone with his single mother. She struggles to feed the two of them, and initially, Raj gets a job as a shoe shine to help make ends meet. But his mother begins overworking herself, and she ends up falling ill. That's half the house's income gone. So as the two descend deeper into poverty, Raj finds himself feeling like he has to steal so he can feed his mother. And as he grabs some bread from a local store, he's immediately caught, and from there, it follows Raj's descent into more and more crime. The film is mainly interested in discussing how Raj wants to leave his life of crime behind, but because of environmental factors, can't. Later in the film, it turns out that, remember the judge from earlier? That was Raj's biological father. He threw his wife out of his home when he found out she was pregnant because he suspected that Raj's father was actually an infamous local criminal. And his personal belief is that criminals give birth to other criminals.
शरीफ का बेटा शरीफ और डाकू का बेटा डाकू होता है। मैं अब भी उसी उसूल पर अटल हूं।
So a lot of Awara is about exploring how much of poverty is a social issue. And spoilers, it's a lot. It's like the whole thing. It looks at how the rich literally believe they're superior to other people, and also how the rich view those in poverty. It really dismantles the idea that poverty is the product of a single person's actions, and instead says that it's a system that's at fault for causing it. It says that the environment someone lives in determines the outcome of their life. It's a film that openly discusses social politics, and it asks, why is it so easy to demonize the poor? And does justice exist for poor people? And those are some heavy questions. I don't know the answers. Perhaps the most impressive thing about Awara is that despite being about all of that, it's not really boring. It's not boring at all. At the end of the day, Awara is still a big budget Bollywood blockbuster. That was hard to say. So I've already played a few clips from the movie, and my hope is you can tell that Awara, from a technical standpoint, is kind of a masterpiece. By having the whole film situate itself in a flashback, it's not really any one single person's voice. By structuring the film's story as testimony in a court, it also makes it feel like there's a degree of truth to it. And that's why the film's weird jumble of musical, crime, and romance even works. On some level, we already understand the film exists as a shared story between multiple characters, so it can just shift tones easily at any point at once. Something I'd really like to highlight is how scenes are staged in Awara. You can usually tell everything you need to know about a relationship or scene purely by how things are framed in the image. These are just some shots out of context, but I'm pretty sure in all of these, you can work out what the basic deal is. And a lot of the time, it's staged more like a play than a movie. Raj Kapoor in general really liked to frame people in a way that isn't realistic. He'll have them face away from each other to create a better image. And despite having loads of things fill the frame so it's visually dense, the actual geometry of the scene is pretty easy to understand. It's obvious what characters are feeling even though there's a lot of stuff on the screen. There's always some sort of thought given to how things are placed in the frame. Not just the actors, but the sets too. Because Awara's sets are often designed to emphasize scale, and there's clearly a lot of work put into each one. Like, you see the wealthy judge's house quite often, and like, there are rich people, and then there's whatever this is. His house is like a gothic mansion. It's like where Resident Evil 1 takes place. That's why it doesn't feel right to call the sets cinematic to me. They're clearly over-exaggerated to create an emotional effect. It's more like a painting, it's more like paint-o-matic, I guess, if that's a word. It wants you to experience some sort of poetic feeling from looking at these shots. It wants to create something inside you that emotionally responds just to how the image looks. Awara has this gorgeous black and white photography, but I swear, it feels like it's a color film. It's vibrant, the camera work is dynamic, the characters feel like they're bursting with passion. But because it can't rely on color though, a lot of the visual storytelling is done through light. Throughout the film, light is seen as a protective presence, but also a finite one. It's something that can go out and be easily swallowed by the dark. And that duality between the black and the white, the light and the dark, visually represents the same conflict that Raj is experiencing internally. He knows crime is wrong, but he feels like he has to do it. It's what he's been raised to do, it's the lens through which he understands the world. The parts that are always tempting Raj to commit crime are draped in these heavy shadows, purposefully obscuring characters' faces. Visually, the film moves him further from the light every time he turns to crime. There's a great dream sequence in the middle of the film where Raj's internal feelings collide, and you can see every time he approaches happiness it's all clouds and light, and when his acts start to weigh on his soul, the shadows start creeping in. Yo, I'm editing this right now and look how sick this hell sequence is, what the hell? The other big thing that stands out about Awara's photography is how intimate the whole thing is. There are so many close-ups of people just straight up looking at each other. When people talk about cinema, they usually mention the big screen experience. You gotta go see Oppenheimer in IMAX. But seeing intimate shots like this in a big screen film really changes how we interpret the image. At this level, you can see every minute detail in someone's face, and you're kind of forced to read their faces like it's an image and interpret some sort of meaning. You can see every motion in a person's face as they attempt to hold back crying, or how their muscles twitch as a giant smile creeps across their face. By shooting a film in this way, every gesture in a person's face communicates something to you. The way Awara uses these close-ups actually reminds me a lot of another director, Ingmar Bergman, the guy behind Seventh Seal and Persona and all sorts of other stuff. There's a great quote from him where he says, "The close-up, the correctly illuminated, directed and acted close-up of an actor, is and remains the height of cinematography. That incredibly strange and mysterious contact you can suddenly experience with another soul through the actor's gaze. A sudden thought, blood that drains away or blood that pumps into the face, the trembling nostrils, the suddenly shiny complexion or mute silence, that is to me some of the most incredible and fascinating moments you will ever experience." So the movie does that. Awara is genuinely like that. Awara does remind me of Bergman's stuff in this way. I can see every ounce of sadness that all of these characters are feeling, but what makes Awara truly heartbreaking is that I can also see them trying to hide that same sadness. Trying to bury it so they don't have to confront it, and I have to read it on their faces instead. And I think that's emotionally closer to how real life works. Most of the time we don't communicate what we're feeling, even when we're trying to. It's usually what's not spoken that says more about us, and Awara manages to capture that in the way it shoots faces in close-up. Awara was doing all of this in 1951. You know what Hollywood was doing in 1951? Blackface. That's just how everything looks in Awara, by the way, because when it comes to the actual storytelling, Awara's in a league of its own. The scene where Raj steals the bread for his mother because she hasn't eaten in 3 days is particularly good at showing this. After Raj is interrogated by the police and taken into a children's prison, you get this shot of dozens of children all talking with each other and lining up for food, before finally panning over to Raj, who's silent. The film's conveying something important here. Raj isn't a single isolated incident. This happens all of the time, and it's so common that everyone's used to it. But after Raj goes up to get served his dinner, he's given 2 rotis, which are, you know, basically bread, and he picks one up, stares at it, and breaks into laughter, which without a single piece of dialogue has conveyed a pretty complicated idea. It's pointing out the irony that Raj was thrown in prison for attempting to get food, which he is now getting in prison for free. And there's another idea under that one too. If you're poor and starving, under a system like this, you're incentivized to go to prison. It has shelter, it has food. The government's more interested in locking people away than taking care of them. Which is, you know, a pretty crazy idea to put in your big budget blockbuster film. As Raj laughs at the roti as a child, the film then transitions into Raj as an adult, still laughing, but at a different piece of roti, which conveys 2 more things. 1, he's still in prison, which means he's definitely still committing crimes. And 2, the rest of the film is going to be about Raj as an adult. And it says all of that, all of those things, with 0 dialogue, and it doesn't even talk down to you as it's doing it. How cool is that? It respects you enough as a viewer to put the pieces together yourself. And that's just like the crime societal side. When it comes to evaluating Awara as a love story, it's gotta be one of the best ones ever made. The 2 leads, Raj Kapoor and Nargis, were actually in love with one another while filming, and you can absolutely tell when watching the film. Something that I really like about romantic films from this era is that kissing was banned back in the day, so filmmakers would have to work around that and find other ways to represent it. It ended up making films feel more romantic if anything, because you had to fill in the gaps instead. There's a moment in Awara where the 2 leads kiss, but we only get to see their reflections. And when they go in for the kiss, a ripple comes and ruins it. I really like this. It makes it feel like it's a shared moment between them, you know? Like we don't even get to see it. And it feels so much more real that way. I'm not sure who came up with this idea specifically, and it takes a whole team to make a movie what it is. But there's two people I want to talk about in a bit more detail. The first of which is the film's producer, director, and main star, Raj Kapoor. That's why his character in Awara is called Raj, by the way. But the second part of his name is pretty important as well. Today, in the Indian entertainment industry, the Kapoor family is a huge dynasty. Their family tree stretches across tons of generations, even till today. See, in Hollywood, if you're a famous actor, your child gets about 3 to 4 shots at becoming a famous actor. If you're a famous actor in Bollywood though, your next 3 to 4 generations definitely become famous actors. But you know what's interesting about the Kapoor family? Nothing, I don't care about any of them. I only care about this bit of the family tree. Prithvi Raj Kapoor, aka Raj Kapoor's dad, is one of the greatest actors in Indian cinema history. And he also plays Raj's dad in the film, which makes this probably one of the biggest films about daddy issues. You don't really see parents and children acting side by side like that, unless it's like Hannah Montana or something. Anyway, Prithvi Raj Kapoor was in tons of classic films like Sikandar or Mughal-e-Azam. These were huge important studio films that influenced pretty much everything that came out after them. So this is how Raj Kapoor got his start in the industry. He had a rich dad. Bearing that in mind, what you need to understand about Raj Kapoor is that he is easily, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the most talented filmmakers of all time. His career is interesting because he entered the film industry as like a leading star actor in 1947, and none of his movies were really that successful. But in 1948, when he was 24, he moved into directing his own films too. The first film he directed and starred in was called Aag, which is actually a really interesting and romantic film about how artists obsess and hurt themselves to create things, which is why it made no money at the box office. So he kept acting in other films. But remember, this is Bollywood, and he had the greatest gift of all, a rich dad. So he just kept acting in other films like nothing happened, and then directed another movie the next year. And he's acting in this one too. It was called Barsat. It's another romantic love story, but it shouldn't really be good, but it is. Like, it's very cliche. Everybody sort of loves each other immediately, and it's really over the top, but because of how good the direction and the music is, and everything, the end result is just an incredibly powerful and personal film. All of this is to say, Raj Kapoor has always been an incredible film director. And as a director, he was always trying to push forward what film could do as a medium. From the start, it's obvious he just really understood how visual storytelling works. He must have watched CinemaSins or something. And as a director, he would draw inspiration from basically anywhere. Awara has clearly been inspired by Western culture, Indian culture, even Russian culture. But I think the best example is something across his entire career. In 1946, Raj Kapoor saw this Hollywood film called The Jolson Story. Fun fact, this movie is like 90% blackface, which made researching this really fun. And in one scene, that luckily has no blackface, a character hums this tune. It's actually a waltz from the late 1800s by a Romanian composer called Iosif Ivanovic. This tune that he just heard in a film must have got under his skin or something, because he ended up using it in like all of his films. And it's not like today, you couldn't just Shazam the tune and look it up on YouTube and see some video on why it's overrated. You had to go find someone who actually knew what they were listening to. That's pretty impressive. When you look at Raj Kapoor's earlier work, the main issue with them is clearly the writing. It's just not very inspired, it's kind of boring, and it doesn't really give a lot to work with. You could have done the best directing job in history, but if the script isn't very good, what can you squeeze out of it? Now here's the thing, Awara is clearly a socialist movie. I've been trying to avoid using that word, but it is. And it's so clearly tied to Raj Kapoor as a person that pretty much every film he made after this had socialist ideas as well. But Raj Kapoor was not a socialist. He didn't need to be. He had a rich dad. But his movies definitely were. And that's because of his screenwriter, Khawaja Ahmad Abbas. Abbas is an interesting figure in his own right. He wrote tons of movies, and after Awara was a huge success, he wrote pretty much every film Raj Kapoor directed afterwards. But what's kind of strange is that while Awara is so directly tied to Raj Kapoor as a person, the script wasn't written for him. It was intended for another famous Indian director called Mehboob Khan. I think something went wrong in production and Khan just decided to walk away, and that's when Raj Kapoor came in and just leapt on it. But Abbas has his own interesting story about how he got to this point. If we go back to Raj Kapoor's dad, Prithvi Raj Kapoor, one of the most famous actors in Indian cinema history, he grew up poor. He wasn't rich, so he 100% was a political figure, and after he found some success in films, he used that clout to get into his real passion, stage acting. This was back in the 30s and 40s of India, and it's important to remember that back then, India was still under the control of the British. So Indian theatre was quite limiting in what it talked about. Most of the plays were adaptations of Western plays, or more folk theatre type stuff based on India's cultural history. And there was a growing need for plays about what contemporary life was like at the time. To solve that, Prithvi Raj Kapoor became one of the founding members of something called the Indian People's Theatre Association, or the IPTA for short. It was a left-wing group created with the intention of being actually left-wing. I know, scandalous. And one of the founding members of the IPTA was, you guessed it, Khawaja Ahmad Abbas. Abbas was a guy who was so convinced in what he believed, he used to openly call himself a Marxist. That's how you know he actually believed in it. The IPTA's goal was trying to raise the level of political knowledge the average person had. In other words, it was trying to use theatre as a tool of education, to teach things that they couldn't get through otherwise. But something else the IPTA was interested in was film. And when you think about it, film is a pretty working class art form. You pay for a cheap ticket and you get to see this really expensive, detailed thing. And the whole reason that's even possible is because a bunch of other people also paid for a cheap ticket. That's not from a book or anything, by the way, that's just my opinion. So the IPTA started looking at several different types of film movements that were happening at the time as well. They looked at early Soviet Union cinema, Italian neorealism, German expressionism, and out of that came a movement called parallel cinema, which was interested in discussing things like class and poverty. And this was the stuff that really made it overseas. But you know what else is true about art house cinema? It doesn't make any money. And just like all of these movies point out, people have got to eat to live. So a lot of IPTA members also started working in mainstream Indian cinema, aka Bollywood, because the IPTA was looking into one other important movement as well, American Hollywood. That meant directors like Charlie Chaplin and Frank Capra, these filmmakers who could absolutely sell out cinemas while also injecting their own political ideas into their films. That's why Awara is such a perfect storm, really. There was a young talented director who wanted to prove himself as an artist, and another extremely talented writer who wanted to express his own concerns and ideas. So because of that, Awara manages to be extremely accessible without having to compromise its political discussion. Don't forget, this was a Bollywood film, and one of the ways the movie expresses those ideas is through the music. Awara is especially famous for one song. After Raj leaves the prison as an adult, he walks out into the street and starts singing Awara Hoon, aka I am an Awara. And Awara is kind of a hard word to translate. When it came out in the Soviet Union, they localized it to the vagabond, which isn't wrong, but I don't think it captures the full nuance of the word. I'd say the word Awara is kind of like the phrase street rat, but that doesn't make for nearly as good of a YouTube thumbnail. Awara is a very derogatory word. It's not a swear word, but it's very insulting. It sort of implies you're rotten to your core. Vagabond is correct, but it doesn't really capture the negative aspects of the word. So when Raj walks out onto the street and says, I am an Awara, with his chest out and his head held high, he's embracing the role society has thrown onto him. But what makes this song particularly special is that it's designed to make you question the negative aspects of the word Awara. And like, just listen to the lyrics. The second line has been localized as, "In troubled times, I am the star in the sky," which is not really the sort of imagery you expect, right? And towards the end of the song, Raj is shown chilling in the local community, which raises the question, who defines what an Awara is? Is it the people suffering, or is it the people profiting off of them? I think there's a pretty obvious reason why this song connected to so many people in the global south. See, this is the thing about the musical numbers in Awara, and in most Bollywood films in general. They're not written to be musical numbers. Awara's songs don't sound like musicals, but just music, and the lyrics are written like they're poetry. So the music doesn't sound like Dear Evan Hansen, or Hamilton, or that one episode of Scrubs. You know, the one where the patient sees everyone sit. It doesn't matter. If you look up the song Awara Hu on YouTube, from 1951 by the way, it has over 50 million views, and that's just on one upload. If you go to the comments of these videos, it's just non-Indian people saying, "I remember this song. Me too." Remember back at the start of the video? All of that time ago, I showed you a clip from the Chinese movie Platform. They're showing the same scene too. Even the Turkish remake remakes the song, and it does it beat for beat the same. I really want to emphasize one point. While Raj Kapoor's films were very thoroughly Indian, they were so much bigger than just India. And I have a good story that can summarize it. Sometimes I like to look up songs from Raj Kapoor's films just so I can listen to them, and for years I thought this one song from a film called Sangam just wasn't on YouTube for some reason. Turns out it's been on there for over 10 years. I just couldn't find it because the title was in Russian. And also it's got 9.3 million views. After sitting through like 26 minutes of me basically saying how cool this guy's films are over and over, I have to imagine you've got one question on your mind. Why have I never heard of this guy? And I think the answer is also kind of a lesson. We need to preserve history. It's been so long since Awara came out that it's in the public domain today, to the degree you can even go to its Wikipedia page and it's just on there. Earlier in the video, I played some footage from Raj Kapoor's first two films. You saw what that looked like. Do you think anybody wants to watch it like this? For this video, I've been using a version of Awara that's widescreen, because it's been restored to 1080p. Did you know the original aspect ratio is actually a square? And the only way to watch that version is through DVD? The top and the bottom of the film, aka half of every shot, just doesn't exist in 1080p. And from what I can tell, it was because a company wanted to cut corners so they could make a little bit more money. And that's terrible. Because when companies do this, they're not preserving history. They're altering it. They make these important films feel like they were far worse than they actually were. Some shots in the widescreen version of Awara just crop out the focus of the shot, so you can't even see what you're looking at. Just let that really sink in. You're watching a worse version of a film people saw 70 years ago. And to people who have never seen this stuff before, you're actively turning them away from it. They think old films have nothing to offer because we've improved on all of it, when the truth is, most modern filmmakers could learn a lot by watching a single movie from the 1950s. There's a reason why nobody in the West knows who Raj Kapoor is, and it has nothing to do with whether his films are good or not. Cinema is very good at capturing a specific moment in time. Not just everything that's on screen, but often the stuff that's between the lines as well. When people talk about the original 1954 Godzilla today, nobody mentions its surface level value. The main appeal is that it's a really nuanced discussion of atomic weaponry in 1954. At one point, pretty much half of the world saw something relatable in Awara, and I'm genuinely afraid that someday, these terrible copies are going to be the only surviving versions. Awara deserves to get preserved. Just so someone can scroll past it on Netflix before watching Family Guy. Hey, hope you enjoyed the video. This one took a lot of time to make. I've got a Patreon now if you'd like to help support me making more of these. My plan is to make about one a month. Thanks.